Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Seth Greene. Today, I've got the good fortune to be interviewing Michael Rozbruch of rozstrategies.com, R-O-Z strategies.com. He is a nationally recognized entrepreneur and the founder of Michael Rozbruch's Tax and Business Solutions Academy, a training and consulting services company that trains and helps other CPAs, attorneys, and enrolled agents build highly profitable practices through proven marketing systems and strategies. He's been on the Inc. 500 list twice, and he has represented on his own thousands of taxpayers who owe the IRS but can't afford to pay, and helped dramatically change their lives. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Seth. Glad to be on with you.
Our pleasure. Let's go back in time a little bit. How did you get started?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's kind of pretty vivid in my mind. So I was in the corporate world. I was in the corporate world for about 18 years. And in 1998, I'll never forget the day, actually. It lives in infamy. It was May 19th, I believe. I had just returned from a 2-week vacation with my wife and 2 young kids. And I got called up to my boss's office, and he basically said, Michael, your services are no longer required.
Wow.
No advance warning, no severance, no nothing. Now, prior to that, when I got hired at that company 2 years prior to that, the place was a mess. I mean, the bank accounts weren't reconciled. The staff was horrible. So I changed out the staff. I reconciled everything. I did a balance sheet audit, which all CPAs and accountants know. If the balance sheet's right, the P&L's pretty much correct as well. So I got everything running like a Swiss clock. So my biggest problem, I realize now, was having too much integrity. I should have made sure something blew up or was booby-trapped while I was on vacation so that when I came back, they needed me. But so much for integrity.
All right.
And then, okay, so then I'm packing up my office. I'm putting my CPA certificate in the box, and those of a certain age will know this thing. It's called a Rolodex. I put that in the box as well. And I started to proceed home. And for whatever reason, I pulled off to the side of the road. And I don't know how long I was there, but 3 things popped into my head. Number one was, what was I going to tell Rosalind, my wife, this time? Because this wasn't the first time that happened. A few years prior to that, I was doing some job transitioning, always looking for the better job, more pay. The second thing was I didn't know where the June mortgage payment was coming from, because, as I mentioned, I was job hopping, and so I was about $100,000 in debt already. But the third thing that popped into my head, I'm kind of like a C-SPAN nerd. So a few months prior to that, I watched the Senate televised hearings on C-SPAN where people, they were the IRS televised Senate finance hearings, where people got up in front of the TV cameras and just talked about how the IRS ruined their lives, padlocked their businesses. People were dying out of stress and heart attacks. Why? All because they owed money to the IRS. Not because these were bad people, not because they took their money and put it in the Cayman Islands offshore, not because they were trying to evade taxes, all because life happens. You know, death or serious illness of a daughter, a spouse, God forbid, a child, parent, a death or serious illness of a loved one, loss of a job. If they were self-employed, one of their customers, their main customer, went belly up. So they used all the estimated payments they had set aside, you know, to put food on the table, roof over their head, nasty divorce, nasty custody battle. So negative life-altering events that took place in people's lives that put the filing and the paying of taxes on the back burner. So I said to myself at that point, not knowing anything about anything, I said, you know what? I think I can help these people. I always like the David versus Goliath battle. I always root for the underdog. So I proceeded on a journey of learning, not so much the technical. I figured, you know, and I never had a client before this. I hardly talked to the IRS before this. I never worked a case before this, but I knew that I'll learn it. What I didn't know that I knew I had to was the marketing. I knew I had to get clients, and there was nothing in the finance or accounting industry that I could learn from. So I went to all these seminars and conferences on marketing and read all these marketing books by and met these gurus that you know very well too, Seth, Dan Kennedy, you know, our hero and guru, Dan Kennedy, Jay Abraham, Paul Hartunian, Bill Glazer, and I just learned and took what they were teaching that was successful in other niches and just ported it over to the tax problem resolution niche that gave me these systems and a predictable flow of leads, prospects, and clients. And that's really how I got started.
So you started this business yourself, helping taxpayers, and it worked. You were able to help them and you were able to attract them. And then how did you evolve from individually helping taxpayers to starting to teach other people how to do it?
Okay, so I had, the name of my company was Tax Resolution Services Company. We were probably the top third, or we were probably the third largest national tax resolution firm in the country. So I exited that business because I put it this way. I took a partner on in the late 2000s, and everything was hunky-dory. And, it's an old story. All of a sudden, a switch flipped in his head, and it was like Congress. It was like gridlock. I said day, he said night. He said night, I said day. So my serenity and peace of mind was worth much more than going through that drill. So I exited the business. I basically walked away. I gave it to him. I gave him this business. And I knew that I always wanted, for the last few years at my old company, I knew I wanted to teach, and I didn't know how to do it. I knew I wanted to do something online with the internet. I've been getting GKIC's newsletters for years and everything else. And I just said, you know what? Just like I learned to do what I did in tax resolution, I'm going to learn the information marketing and online world too. And I just went in it full force, joined GKIC, joined, I was in Peak Performers. I was in Dan Kennedy's mastermind for a couple years. By the way, anyone listening, if you really want to leapfrog and cut out the trial and error, you need coaches today, and you need to belong to at least one mastermind. I mean, that's been my experience. I attribute a lot of that to my success, as being with other successful people and learning from them. So I got a coach. I did the titanium, and I learned how to do information marketing and come up with an info product. I took my 16 years of in the trenches experience with marketing, sales, practice management, and actual technical case resolution, and developed the product along with my wife, Rosalind. She's the genius. She's the one who has the journalism background. I just talk into the computer, transcribe it. She does the editing and creates the product. And luckily, I was on the ground floor of this industry, because prior to 1998, there was no tax resolution industry. It was the wild, wild west. The IRS can go into a taxpayer's bank account without advance notice. There were no appeal rights. There really wasn't an offer and compromise system program, which is the Fresh Start Initiative, or the Tax Debt Settlement Program. So then President Clinton in 1998 signed the Tax Reform and Restructuring Act that basically gave birth to this industry. So I was lucky enough to be on the ground floor and be one of the pioneers. So when I launched my info business, Roz Strategies, I had a lot of affinity with some of the other folks who were there at the ground floor who had lists. When I launched, I had no list. So they helped promote me to their folks. And that's really what got me off the ground. Now we have our own database, thank God, and everything's going pretty well.
That is absolutely incredible. I know it hasn't just been a meteoric rise.
No.
There's been ups and downs. I find we learn more from, avoiding mistakes as we do trying to just emulate success. What are some of the bigger challenges you've overcome, and what did you learn from that? Doing direct marketing, it's really testing. Okay, because what's working this week is not going to work in 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now. So I'm constantly looking at new avenues to bring in clients. Some of the big obstacles that I've overcome were trying to
trying to get people interested in what I had to offer. Trying to make sure that folks know there's a lot of people who know who I am in this niche, but there's a lot of people who don't know me from Adam. And sometimes my challenge was, hey, don't you know, I would automatically assume if someone contacted me that they checked me out or whatever. Don't you know me?
But, don't you know who I am, right?
Yeah, exactly. A little ego.
Latte, sir, right?
So overcoming one challenge was starting from scratch with a lot of folks. You have to earn your stripes. No matter what you do, every single day, you still have to earn your stripes, and that's probably one of the biggest obstacles I've overcome, and still overcoming it.
Absolutely. I still have that issue because you and I are famous in a certain way in our little niches.
Right.
And you go to your conference and you're the rock star, right, and you walk in to Starbucks and nobody cares.
Right.
My kids, they say Daddy's YouTube famous, but not really famous. The 150,000 YouTube views don't count unless I'm at a marketing conference, and then people know who I am.
Yeah, and Seth, with all the distraction today, and that's an overused cliche, but it's getting worse every day, every week. I mean, the amount of people subscribing to other gurus' lists, the emails they get, all the distractions they have to overcome, that we have to overcome to be able to look. The way I look at it is I'm doing my customer a disservice if I didn't make available the tools and resources for him or her to do better in their life and practice. I mean, that's how I approach this.
Absolutely. You've got a moral obligation to help them.
Right. Right. The other obstacle is, for lack of a better word, there's haters out there. There's people that I did a CPA Academy webinar yesterday. Okay, there were 570 people registered. About 350 actually showed up, and you get and you get the feedback. At the end of and my marks were good, and there were a bunch of testimonials. But there were one or two people who said, oh, don't let this guy ever do a webinar again, blah, 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 blah. So, and I don't focus on that. But, it's like, really? I mean, I gave so much value during this webinar, but they focus on, oh, I can't believe he's pitching something. I
got the nerve of making an offer of how they could get it done for them or participate. How dare you?
Yeah. So I'm sure you know that also very well.
All too well. You've learned from and worked with and been in mastermind groups with some of the biggest names in the marketing industry, and I'm sure in your industry as well. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I've ever gotten was, if you don't know something, if you don't know how to do something, research it and learn it, at least to understand it. You can then put it, you can outsource it so that you're not tied up in the details. But there's two things I tell people never to delegate, and that's their checkbook and the marketing. You need to know, like practice owners, especially accountants, they don't like marketing.
Nope.
They hate selling even more. And I speak to folks and they go, okay, I'm going to get your stuff, Mike. I'm going to get your program and I'm going to give it to this person to implement. That's fine. But if you don't have direct oversight responsibility and you're checking in with that person on a daily basis to make sure what's getting implemented is the right thing to get implemented, then you're wasting your money. You're wasting your money on marketing. So that's one of the things I teach.
Absolutely. With all that is constantly changing, and I mean, there's, you know better than me, but at least 50,000 pages of IRS tax code, and they revise so much of it every year. How do you stay on top of that?
Well, you go to your industry conferences. The tax resolution niche changes also every year, not to the extent the regular 1040, tax code does. But I mean, there's a lot of resources. I subscribe to IRS alerts. So anytime there's a change, I get it from the horse's mouth in an email, and I can go online and get more information. But going to your industry conferences, I think is huge. I mean, there's not one conference I never went to that I didn't come away with either with a lot of technical knowledge, but a marketing idea that would make me thousands of dollars. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you can hear the same thing 3, 4, 5 times, and then on the 5th time, the light bulb goes off because you're ready to accept. You're ready to accept that information, whereas you weren't, at an earlier date.
Absolutely. And you've built in your membership program, in your coaching program, in your products, you've worked with some amazing people in our industry to maximize that. And you've got an incredible resource, an easy win you make available to them right away that gets them super excited and gets some great results. Talk a little bit about that for our folks who are listening and watching.
Right. So if anyone who buys our program, our course, and it takes about 7 days to ship it. It comes in a box. There's a lot of stuff that's online too, but it comes in a box. So before you actually get the course, we send out an email with a link to one of the stealth referral letters that are in the system so that the CPA or the EA or the attorney can hit the ground running and get some quick wins by sending out this stealth referral letter to their existing and previous client database. That's basically announcing to the world now, to your database, that you are now providing IRS representation services in your local community. Here's a list of the practice areas that you're doing: offers and compromise, penalty abatement, appeals representation, unfiled tax returns, etc. And because most practitioners who don't do tax resolution, that are doing tax prep for 100, 300, 700 people, they're sitting on top of a gold mine. They have tax resolution cases, and by the way, that are worth $5,000 each, sitting right in their database. But their clients don't know they do this type of work, so the practitioner's not going to know about it. So by sending out this letter, they start getting calls from their clients. And as you know, Seth, and I'm sure you teach, that every person knows another couple of hundred people in their circle of influence. So they're getting referrals from their families and friends as well. So it's a quick win for the practitioner.
Absolutely. And if they get just one case from it, it's more than paid for whatever they're doing with you.
Yeah. And
theoretically paid for it before it even gets there. That's great.
Exactly. So,
how do you get so much done in a day? What are some of your secrets for being so productive?
That's interesting you say that, because I don't think I get that much done in a day, or maybe I'm just beating myself up at the end of the day to where I want to get more. I think it's the blessing and the curse syndrome. Well, luckily, I have a supporting business partner and wife who really helps. And that's the other thing, that even if your spouse isn't involved at all in your practice or your business, you need the support of that person for you to keep going forward in whatever you're doing. It's very important to have that person behind you in all these endeavors, because it's not, if you're going to fail, it's when you're going to fail on certain things, because in order to gain ahead, you're going to have some losses on the way. Otherwise, you're not going to learn anything. I also have 2 other staff members here who are great, who have been actually, I brought my executive assistant from Tax Resolution Services, who I worked with over there for 10 years. She's over here, so she knows how I work. She knows me already, and she can anticipate what I'm thinking, which is very, very important as well. Plus, with technology today, like if you want to set up a landing page, as you know, even I could do that in Lead Pages or ClickFunnels. So the resources and the tools available really help you to be productive today.
Absolutely. Any software or favorite apps you use to manage your incredibly busy life and workload?
Well, I just put LinkedIn. Just put the LinkedIn app on my phone. I didn't even know that was available, because we're doing some LinkedIn reach out marketing right now. So that's cool.
I gotta interrupt. LinkedIn not only has the LinkedIn app, but there is also the Pulse app, which is from LinkedIn, and Sales Navigator. And we're using LinkedIn right now and generating, I think, 5-10 meetings in the last 2 days. So wow. We'll have to talk about what you're doing, because we got some stuff that's working I'm happy to share.
Yeah, yeah, and I know Microsoft just bought them, so I think they're going to plus their game up with regard to having professionals use that platform to market. So that's one thing. I have Dropbox on my phone. I use Dropbox as my files management server, if you will. Lead Pages is great. ClickFunnels is great. Infusionsoft, I don't know what I would do without Infusionsoft, which is a autoresponder on steroids, as you know. So those are probably the main software tools that we use.
Awesome. Fascinating interview, incredible journey, amazing results that you've built. Anything else you want to share or leave our viewers with that I forgot to ask you?
No, but we are, if I may be so bold, we are doing an event. We're doing a tax resolution, marketing, and technology 3-day event in Orlando, January 18th through 20th. I don't know when you're going to be playing this, Seth, but if it's before that, people can go to our homepage, which is rozstrategies.com, and get info. We're having like 17 speakers there. It's not going to be a pitch fest, although some of the speakers are going to be offering their resources because they have the same mentality that I do, that we do, that it would be a disservice not to offer resources. But there's going to be a lot of new stuff unveiled that we didn't have previously. So if someone is interested in this niche, that's a real good place to get started, which would be the Orlando event in January.
All right, I'll tell you what. We'll put the video up in the next day or two.
Right.
So that people have time to see that. The audio won't go. We're a couple of weeks ahead on the iTunes podcast, but we'll put the video up now so that there's at least some time for them to see that.
Okay. I appreciate it, Seth. This has been great. I mean, thanks so much for allowing me to come onto your platform.
Of course. This has been Seth Greene with Michael Rozbruch of rozstrategies.com.